Pete Manglaviti used to be an instructor for me at the OTC Center for Workforce Development, teaching technical training there. Tom Douglas stole him away, and now he is the corporate trainer for JMark Solutions, and is really kind of our Microsoft guy. Today is to really talk about how do you train the workforce to be knowledgeable in the different areas that they have to be with all these different platforms. And then my newest friend is Ben Petersen. Ben Petersen works at ResolveITComputers, get it, ResolveITComputers. I thought that was really cool. And Ben is representing, yes, as you saw before, the Microsoft side of things and a little bit of Google. And then last but certainly not least, we have Josh Willis. And Josh Willis is the co-founder, owner of thinkdigital.io, which is kind of an entrepreneurial support system for people that want to develop their own ideas. He's got a staff of software developers that will help turn dreams into reality. So let's give him a big hand again. And this is not a monologue. Please feel free to interject and talk, a little bit of smack, a little bit of whatever. If you have comments that you want to make, again, we want to make this interactive because that's where you get the most benefit. So, Josh, how are you tonight?
I'm good.
All right. Well, why don't you talk to us? Okay, so we've got this idea of PeopleSoft. We've got this idea about Microsoft and Apple working together. How did you feel about, what are the pros and cons of this, and what were you thinking when you heard the announcement?
Anytime major powers like that, we went in and disconnected the mic just so that we keep it more casual,
Perfect.
less one person talking at a time. Anytime I think the big enterprises start to collaborate or even compete, I think ultimately the winner in these cases ends up being the end users and the consumers, because they all end up benefiting from it. Either A, they end up with technology that gets better through competition, or they end up with technology that works more seamless through cooperation. So it's always fun and interesting to see when some big power takes the stage and decides that they're going to start supporting somebody else or work closely with somebody else. It was a huge shock to the system when Microsoft took the stage. I thought we were all being pumped at that moment. I honestly didn't believe it at first. I had to pull it up. I'm Googling, I'm tweeting, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? Why is Microsoft on the stage? That being said, I think it shows a lot of promise for what Microsoft is trying to do. This Microsoft that we have today is not our fathers or maybe even grandfathers' Microsoft anymore. It's a new Microsoft, and they're looking to try to support this bring your own device movement that's happened. So all these individuals with iPads and iPhones can use these great Office products on those devices and not have to sacrifice that. So, it's always fun to see when that stuff happens. It can be a bit of a shock to the system sometimes, but like I said, I think ultimately the consumer comes out on top when things like that happen.
Cool. So let's just go around with the pros first, and then we'll come back to you on the cons. So Ben, talk to me about what your thoughts are with from the Microsoft side of things.
Well, each of those, if we're talking about Microsoft, Apple, and Google, obviously they each have their really strong areas, and then they kind of sort of compete on the edges in a way. You could kind of consider them, they have sort of their territory, and then where they overlap, there's a little bit of competition and stuff that goes on. This isn't the first time that Apple and Microsoft work together. They've had partnerships in the past for various things. They've invested in each other. They've invested in each other, at various times, and so I do look at it as a good thing. There are cons to it when we want to get to that, but I do look at it as a good thing. Like Josh says, with the end user is going to be better off with it, but it also just speaks to the general idea of innovation. Hopefully the best parts of what Apple's able to do in terms of marketing and design have pushed Microsoft in a good direction that way, and the best things about how Microsoft's been able to deal with enterprise technology and security have pushed Apple in that direction as well. So the competition has also brought about a lot of good for the consumer, and so cooperation can do it as well. I don't know that cooperation or competition necessarily does it any better than the other. It'll just be interesting to see what they do come up with. So.
Great. Pete, what is your, from an educational or workforce or just someone that's in the tech profession and representing all sides, what do you see?
Sure. It's funny, I was just thinking back as I'm listening to these guys talk about it, when I first started training with Sherry about 9 years ago, probably? 8, 9 years
Just
ago?
a few.
Just a few. I would train completely different. With that short time span, I would train completely different these days. Back then, you could be the Microsoft guy, you could be the Apple guy, and we refer to it like that. I'm a Unix guy. Oh, Microsoft, really? No. But now what we're seeing is more and more is your IT worker, the level is up and up and up. Now we need people that understand that, hey, you're going to work into an environment, you have VMware running, vSphere, I have domain controllers here, I have gateways with Apple over here, and oh, by the way, there's some Linux file servers. So this is no big surprise to us that finally they're saying, look, how do we come together? How do we make it more seamless? So I think it's exciting for IT professionals. I'm a little concerned for the IT companies. Because what's happening is, even if you look at our, like in my company, if we look at our level 1 technicians, even 3 years ago, the level that we have now is much, much higher. So the demand and the salaries are going up as well. So I think there's going to be a balance there. You can't just hire, the worker that is great with cabling. In the past, you could have like the IT professional that could do a little of this and a little of that. I mean, these are complex solutions now, and it's requiring a higher level. The last thing is not just salaries, but trying to find that talent. We were just talking about this earlier. Is who do we have? What are we hiring for? Levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, we can't bring people in quick enough, and that's because that these different technologies are forcing us to have to bring another level up. So very exciting. But I think we're going to see some shakeup. I think you're going to see those that are willing to invest in training take a slide back to the companies that are willing to put the money forward.
So with that, Pete has kind of segued into some of the cons. Let's just kind of come
Sorry.
back. No, great. Ben, what do you see some of the cons being?
Well, in terms of, these companies are also big data companies. And so Google's a big data company. Apple really is a big data company, whether they want to admit to it or not. And Microsoft, certainly with the move with Windows 10, is really trying to become a bigger data company. So, whenever there's collaboration there's always a privacy concern. Personally, I don't have as many concerns on the corporate side of privacy. My concern was always when there's, government involvement in that, personally. And so I see, collaboration between the companies, as long as the government stays out of it, as a really good thing. Because they're going to be focused on the consumer. The point that Pete brought up about how it's going to be difficult for the IT companies, I agree because in a lot of ways, because in the past you had all these different solutions that you had to have somebody that knew enough about them all to integrate them. But it could be that as going forward, when there's collaboration, they're already building tools for the integration, and so it will not necessarily require as much expertise in all the different fields, and you can train more to a specific point.
I would love to see that happen.
That's
I'd love
pie in
to
the
see that
sky,
happen.
right?
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, that again, that's the concern. Whenever you have, technology has been the fastest moving industry for decades now, and so you just can't keep up with it in a lot of ways. And education has trouble keeping up with it, right? You go to school, you think you're going to get a degree in something. By the time you finish your degree in 4 years, that field doesn't even really exist anymore. It doesn't exist how you started. And so experience is key in technology, and that's going to continue to be a difficulty for companies.
So with that, and I want to take the camera with me if we can, because I know Dr. DeClue is back here. Dr. DeClue, not to put you on the spot, I think I significantly warned you ahead of time. Being the department chair of the Computer and Information Sciences program at Southwest Baptist University, can you also talk to the concept of how we are going to go about training your next generation of
Sure.
IT worker?
There's some truth in what he had to say, that things change rapidly in the technical arena. But computer science is a little bit like mathematics, if you'll go with me for just a second. It's a little bit like mathematics in that it's an applied discipline. So even though we apply mathematics across the spectrum of all of the different areas that we're in, the basic principles of mathematics really don't change all that much. And in the same way, in computer science, we apply it and the technology changes monthly, but the principles of computer science really don't change all that much. And so what we will teach in computer science will certainly pay attention to the market. We will certainly look at tools and technologies that need to be placed into the curriculum. But the basic principles of computer science are really enduring, and they don't change that rapidly. So that would be my 2 cents.
Great, thank you, Tim. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions pertaining to, for any of our panelists about anything they've said thus far?
I do.
Yes.
I know in the middle, I'm not good with names. You said something, if the government stayed out of it, the consumer would benefit, but there are those people that might view this as Microsoft, Google, and Apple got together and said, let's form an oligopoly and take over the market and create barriers, huge barriers to entry for other IT companies to come in and build. So how do you view that? Do you think there's a possibility they've done that and said, hey, let's create, we're the 3 big players, let's keep everybody else out? Or are they really just trying to meet demand and just keep up with the times?
It's a great question.
Certainly that, I mean, do I answer that first? Certainly that happens, and you don't necessarily want to get too much into the politics of it, but the point is that these companies, the only way they make money is by doing things that people want. Okay, so if you're not doing something somebody wants, they're not going to pay you money for it. So ultimately, they do have to produce products that people want. So as far as the collaboration goes, sure, you know, again, those are concerns with it. But even when you have those types of cartels, so to speak, there's always cheating, right? So you're going to have a company, yeah, they're supposed to work on this, but then this company goes off and does this side little project. Google's always coming up with stuff. Apple's always coming up with stuff. So the collaboration's not that tight. You know, it's pretty loose, and you know, it doesn't concern me personally.
If I may, just to comment on that, you know, we talked about how kind of shocking it was to see Microsoft on stage at that Apple event touting Microsoft Office for iOS. It was kind of a cool moment. There's no love lost, though. Not but a week later, the CEO of Microsoft is on stage demonstrating their new Lumia line, and he's talking about the Lumia phone, and this was just before the new Microsoft Surface Book announcement and the Surface Pro 4, and he's talking about Office on the Lumia device, and first he demos it on the iOS device, and he said, this isn't my phone, it's somebody else's, you know, I'm not as familiar with it. And he showed off the demonstration, he got done, he put it down, he said, now on to a device that I feel is much better, it's my own Lumia, and he pulls out his Lumia device, his Windows phone.
Good for him.
And so it's, I mean, there's you know, as been said, the collaboration's not that tight. They're not in bed with each other. They're neighbors who've learned not to constantly try to blow each other's houses up at this point.
I would say the technology's changing so fast too that anytime you would get something that creates so-called barriers to trade, somebody comes up with some new technology that bypasses the whole thing, and so you know, again, that's one of the benefits and also challenges of how fast technology goes. So.
Anyone else? Yes, Steve.
Well, that sort of takes you back to DHS and beta formats, because you're going to have winter out there, but that's one of the reasons why Apple almost went bankrupt 30 years ago, was because they tried to withhold all the interfaces from being developed internally. They wanted it to be a one-stop shop for all their applications and everything to be Apple. And IBM embraced Microsoft at the time and opened up the API for their computers, and that almost bankrupted Apple back in the 80s.
Very interesting. Well, we'll move on now. Let's go to a question. Let's talk about from a student perspective. We do have 3 students in the room today. How would you direct them, knowing about all of this convergence and the rapidly changing technology scene, how would you help them know what direction to take their education?
That's a good question. It's a good question for you.
Yeah. Wow. First and foremost, I strongly recommend pursuing computer science, some type of networking engineering in college. I think hands-on is really important, but I feel like that's a good place to meet other like-minded people. I think that's often skipped over or not quite talked about enough, that one of the benefits of going to a program like that is you have similar others, people that have same interests. But one recommendation I would make is what's more important, I think the most important thing now, is if I was in college right now, I would start asking companies if I could just meet with them for a few minutes. If a college student or if a high school student said, hey Pete, I know you're the technical trainer, you got 15 minutes to tell me a bit more about what your company does? I've done it before, I'd be more than happy to do it. That's probably the first thing I would do, is find out in that market, what exactly are they doing? What technology are they doing? What type of systems are they working at? And then start targeting that, start learning those systems. I don't think you can just rely on, I got Microsoft certification, or I went through this coursework in college. I think the most important thing now for students to do is start asking companies, what the heck do you do? I was really surprised, and this is certainly not a knock towards OTC in any way, but I was doing interviews over at OTC, and I was talking about JMark, and they said, who's that? I'm like, we're that very large company across the street that might employ you. So I think that's one of the big things we need to get, especially younger people, thinking about is, what do the companies do that you want to work for? Start practicing that stuff with virtual machines and labs, and then when you go for those jobs, say, here's what I've been doing, aside from just going to school. I'm a great student, I'm an A student, I go to class every day, but when I go home, I do X, Y, Z. That's the people I'm seeing come through that are really being successful in positions like ours at JMark.
I think building this education, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, because of the rapid involvement and change in the IT industry and in the technology industry in general, learning becomes a constant process. It can't just stop when you graduate. It can't just stop whenever you leave high school or when you leave college. It has to be an ongoing process. One of the thoughts that I had when hearing about what the schools are doing to try to combat this, and it's the same advice I would offer to the students, is one of the best things you can learn at school is how to learn. Because that stuff, everything is going to change. Everything that we know 50 years ago has changed astronomically between then and now. So the biggest benefit is to learn how to learn correctly. With the growth of the internet and where we're at now, there's more content available and more education available than there has ever been in all of history. And so to be able to know how to find that information, find those answers, and to harness that is probably the biggest talent. When I'm hiring people, and I've been through this back when I was job hunting before starting my own business, the biggest skill set is I don't have all the answers, but I know how to find the answers. And that is invaluable. It's so hard to teach, and if you can grasp that concept, you will have a job forever. You will never have a hard time finding a job if you can learn that.
I'm going to kind of throw, Ben, did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
I mean, I think I would have said basically the exact same thing Josh said. Learn how to be a problem solver.
Wait, is this the Microsoft guy agreeing with the Apple guy?
We agree that there are problems.
Okay.
Whose fault they are is up for debate.
Whose fault they are and who can solve them is the that, learn how to be a problem solver. And there's a difference between, seeing problems and being like a negative person, right? Because there's going to be a lot of times when there's a lot of people that I would say are really good at pointing out problems, right? And that's actually a really good skill to have. But the problem there is that then there's no solution provided. So if you're good at identifying problems, great first step. Learn how to become a problem solver. And so any sort of really almost any degree or field can teach you how to be a problem solver. My degree is in Arabic and Middle Eastern studies. That's
I can
the
see the
point.
connection.
That's why I fix computers.
Yeah.
So the point being, and from my perspective, that like Josh said, learn how to learn and how to solve problems, and then you're not going to have a problem with the job.
I think employers are, in terms of training, are going to have a wake-up call in terms of resources. What I mean by that is, not all companies, of course, but there's some companies that, as I work with different companies, they say we don't want to train too hard. So, for example, I worked for an organization that said if you get all your people certified and trained up at this level, they're going to leave us, right? They're going to go ahead and take that great knowledge, and then another company will come by and say, look, we're going to offer you 10% more than what you're making, and that's a real thing. I think culture helps battle that kind of thing, but I don't think it can be avoided anymore. What this generation wants, I'm seeing every day come through my door, is people that want a continual education program. The big selling point is, so what you're telling me is if I come in your organization, you're going to help nurture a career. You're not going to handhold it, but you're going to help build a career. You're going to build a lifelong plan for me on how to move up in the organization. So, when I first started off in IT, it was more of, oh, company, I want to go for training. Send me somewhere for training. What I'm seeing more and more is continual education plans. I think companies have to spend more money really pulling in trainers or resources where they can help track their people to get them to a certain point. I think that's what the most successful companies are going to have to do. I don't think you can just say, well, get certified, we'll send you to a training class. They're not going to be able to compete with the companies that are building long-term plans with each employee. And I think it's a good thing. That binds the employee to that company.
Love it. Did we adequately cover the cons of the Apple? I don't think we kind of got this.
Was brilliant back here, so.
The cons of the Apple, we'll have to buy that question, so.
Yeah. So the cons, quickly go into what you see some of the negatives of this, besides the idea of an cartel or an oligopoly or whatever you want to call that.
Fragmentation, for lack of a better term, that's always a bit of a concern when you're dealing with technology. I have part of my life in Apple's realm, I have part of my life in Google's realm. The better they play together, the more interested I am in spreading that instead of staying in one ecosphere. The problem is as inevitably happens, the moment they decide they don't want to play nicely together, I end up with my life split down the middle. It's almost like coming into a child getting to choose their parents who happen to be together at the time, and then suddenly their parents split up, and now you got to split your time between dad and mom, and you get the same kind of thing where because
Which is which?
Who's dad, who's mom?
Yeah. Just kidding. Because Microsoft has done such a great job of supporting Office for the iPad now and for the Mac products, I'm more inclined to use Office products because most of my customers are using Windows-based products. I can send them a document without having to convert it to something else. Apple does a great job of allowing that conversion to happen, but it's still one less step that I have to perform before I can send it right off to the customer. Google's even better about their online cloud collaboration. I create a document in Google Drive, and I can share it with somebody. They get on any device in a web browser, and they can edit, and we can live collaborate. That's amazing. Until Google decides to stop playing nicely with Apple, or whatever app that I'm using to view that, or things like that. Then I end up with stuff stuck in one ecosphere, stuff stuck in another ecosphere. And so there is always that, that concern of that fragmentation when those collaboration moments happen, because I do think they come and go in cycles. They've got times when, as you pointed out, Apple and Microsoft, this isn't the first time they've played in the same playground. It won't be the last, and it also won't be the last that they decide to part ways yelling and screaming at each other. So, it's you kind of, the consumers in this instance, just kind of end up along for the ride and see what happens.
So really these cloud services are driving some of this convergence is what you're kind of hinting at, correct?
Yeah, with the advent of faster internet, you've got fast cell phone speeds. I've got more power on my mobile device in my pocket than NASA had when we put people on the moon. I've got a faster internet connection than we had 5 years ago. Even 2 or 3 years ago, or half the United States. My LTE is still faster than half the suburban DSL lines that are out there right now. It's ridiculous how fast our connection to the outside world through the internet is. Because of that, some of those barriers and limitations that have been there for so long are starting to erode away. Cloud services are becoming more and more practical because we can retrieve that information instantaneous. You no longer have to worry about putting information up there and then, well, hopefully you can get it in a couple of weeks. Hopefully you'll be able to get it fast enough when you need it. Now it's available at your fingertips. So I think there is, there was some talk about the megapolies, the giant corporations, the mega corporations that will one day take over the world and rule all of us and plug us into a computer. But I think at the same time when things like this happen, there is still room for advancement. You've got smaller startups like Dropbox who have gone from a small man organization to a basically they're becoming an enterprise level solution now with Dropbox for Business, making it very easy to sync and backup and archive files for collaboration. And so there's
Right on mine, man. I'm not
Should I say that louder?
Yes, go for it.
So on a soapbox. Dropbox is not back.
Okay, okay. You know, but there is still room for these startups, I think, to provide alternative solutions. You know, just, you know, there was talk about concern about IT companies going away. I think that there's going to be more and more room for the IT consultant in this new age because there's so much availability and so many options out there. It's less that this is your solution, this is what you're going to do, and I'm just going to implement it, and more what's going to be the best fit for you, which is why you end up having to have IT people who are so widely diversified who can see all those parts and how to put them together and how to plug them together.
100% on that. This is a great time to be an IT consultant, to be in the IT field. So many more options available. So, you know, the negative is, you know, and I understand that too. So, you know, if Apple, Microsoft, Google come together, you know, they certainly will put barriers up. I mean, we know they're going to put barriers up to protect their own interests. But what a great time for IT companies to offer a slew of different services. I mean, where was cloud computing like 6-7 years ago? I mean, we're just scratching the surface, and I want to see these guys come together to figure out what the next big leap is. I mean, look at Facebook. Facebook now invested in Oculus Rift for VR. You know, you have Microsoft get into in their product, and Valve doing theirs. So this is a big surprise. We're going to see more and more of these companies come together.
And then Google with Magic Leap.
Yep, yeah, Leap, exactly. They're going to come together, figure out where they benefit with each other, and then they'll spin off. So I'm not too worried about like one ruling Skynet, so to speak.
So what I almost hear you saying is for an entrepreneur, because we do have a teacher here that teaches an entrepreneurship program, and most of the people here are entrepreneurs, you're saying that these negatives are almost not negatives, they're opportunities for individuals such as these guys to come in and exploit problems in the system, correct? And
Absolutely.
create a business around it.
Well, I mean, you look at technology, you know, the convergence and the divergence again of the diversity in the technology field. You know, anytime there's convergence, then you have that, you leave the outlying areas open for innovation. So, so these are going to then open up other parts of the market for smaller companies, I think, to do it up. But to the point that Josh was saying about the cons, you know, any con of adopting a new technology is always that it's going to lose support, right? So it's like, you know, Google's really great about this. I love Google and all, but you know, they'll introduce a product and be like, oh, this is really awesome, and in a year be like, yeah, we decided we don't like it anymore. And so, but Google's not the only one to do that. You know, Apple's done that, Microsoft's done that, and so whenever there's something like this, the risk in adopting any of the new technologies is always that then they're going to go away. You have to have a critical mass of people that do adopt them for it to be profitable for the company to do that. So.
If I was starting my career over again, I wish I was 18 now.
Me too.
The opportunity with these companies coming together and the technology that's coming, there is more opportunity than ever before, in my opinion. Right now, than ever before.
You know, I had to really, oh, sorry, I didn't see
Yeah,
you.
I'm going to toss something out there because I worked with the technology in the 90s called asynchronous transfer mode. And that is cybersecurity at the next level. And they've added it because everything, all of our infrastructure is built on TCP/IP infrastructure. And the problem with TCP/IP infrastructure is all the packet structures are deterministic, so you can reconstruct the packet delivery fairly simply. Where the asynchronous transfer mode is more efficient in delivery of packets and use of delivery of data because it's non-deterministic in when packets are reassembled because it's all in the packet encoding. And we're now at a transformational time where ATM will probably surface as a necessity within the next decade.
Okay, when you have mesh networks and stuff, you start developing newer protocols for communication. But remember that technology is not, you know, it's not necessarily the best thing that always wins out, right? It's the thing that's able to adapt best. The same in biology, right?
Right.
So it's the technology that's able to be adopted and adapted and integrated best, not necessarily the technology that is best per se.
Right. No, I agree with that because you have to build gateways to introduce it because you can't throw billions and trillions of dollars of infrastructure away overnight. It has to be gradually introduced.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move on to the next question, and if we come back when we have time, we're getting short on time. So, and what does all this convergence mean to the future of operating systems? You know, what will be the distinction among OS 6, Windows, or even Linux?
Well, I mean, I think we're already, there's going to be for the foreseeable future still quite a distinction, but I think we're already seeing, especially with web browsers, you know, a lot of cross-platform stuff going on with the software as a service, cloud computing client. You know, Google's really pushing forward with their Chrome OS, which, you know, I think is going to go somewhere personally. I think that's something that can be really beneficial. What they decide to do hardware-wise with it, I don't know. I'd like to see them, you know, look a little closer at what Microsoft and Apple are doing as far as hardware goes. But Google has stayed pretty far away from hardware stuff, you know, beyond some of their Nexus tablets and things. So,
I got a question for the group here. Anyone have a smart TV? Smart TVs? What OS does it run?
I have a Chromecast on every TV in my house.
Yep.
So.
Does everyone know what OS is running in the back end? Hopefully not.
I don't know, what's my Roku?
Right. The bottom line is this:
Is it Linux?
is with the Internet of Things.
Oh, so I can say I run Linux now, because I run, okay.
You look at things like smart TVs and then eventually more smart appliances. I don't think you're going to see the evangelism that you see now with like, this is Windows 12 and I'm an Apple iOS guy. I think what's going to happen is operating systems will fall more in the background. It'll just be part of daily operation, Internet of Things. My toaster, you know, reported an issue, so it'll send an alert. I don't think we're going to be as fanatic about the separation between the two. I think there'll be more of design decisions, how Apple kind of handles their side versus maybe Microsoft being a lot more corporate. I think you'll see more design decisions, but I don't think the average person is going to see a big difference in the operating systems. Back in '96, I looked at Linux and said, you know what, Linux needs to become more like Microsoft, where the workstation makes more sense. And I said, you know, I think the server in Microsoft needs to go ahead and be more like Linux, where it allows the administrator to have more freedom. And what we've seen over the years is they kind of meet in the middle, right? You now see some Linux desktops. You now see Microsoft opening up, you know, you have a lot more power in like Windows 2012 than we had in NT4. I think the same thing's going to happen with OSs. I just don't believe it's going to be this big of a separation.
You know, to build on what you were saying, I think we really are hitting an age with the Internet of Things where OSs are becoming ambiguous. They become less important. And in these instances, because of these different platforms and because of all that just something that happened for so long, it bred innovation. And that innovation we're seeing is the ability to develop cross-platform. That's in a sense what the web is. It allows code to run on any operating system, any device, any hardware infrastructure, regardless of its type, and it runs the same, in theory, on any device. We're starting to see that same thing happening with application development, with big corporations like Xamarin Studio coming up and offering a platform where I can, as a development and a software development company, create a solution in one programming language and then deploy it to 3 or 4 different platforms with one code base, one set of business logic, and suddenly have an application that's going to run on any device. At that point, the operating system to me becomes irrelevant because I've provided a solution with one code base to all of my customers regardless of what they want to use.
Well, so the question becomes, what's the operating system then, right? You know, Xamarin's really the only thing that becomes relevant. So.
I'm going to comment, I did that in research and development for 12 years. We just built our application, so if we had a strong API interface into the operating system, we didn't care what the operating system was. I could go across about 8 different domains, operational domains, and I didn't care with my applications because we designed it that way up front. So if you do use strong interface development at the very beginning, you solve all those problems.
Until they update the OS. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah. No.
So you had some comments, Ben, about, did you have something that you wanted to add to Josh's?
No,
Okay.
I mean that I agree that the operating system, I think Pete was saying it too, is going to fall more into the background, and as things become more web-based in their delivery. you're going to see operating system become less important to the end user experience.
Any questions from the audience at this point? If you had to look forward within the next, we don't even have to go out 10 years, right? Let's say within the next 2 years, where do you see Apple, Google? You've given some insight from competitive advantage that if all operating systems are going to look the same, you hinted at they're going to have to make their presence known in different ways, probably through the Internet of Things. So is it going to go beyond the Apple Watch? And is it going to be an Apple toaster? Is it going to be a Windows door system? How do you see this all playing out?
I think, no.
I wish I knew. I mean, if I knew, I'd be making a lot more money than I do right now. But it's exciting because, it's exciting not to know sometimes, right? There's a lot of things that I look at with wearable computing that I'm really excited about that freak other people out. I wear contacts. I am super excited about having a heads-up display in a contact lens that connects with an earpiece. I don't have to wear a watch. I don't have to carry a phone. All I have to do is make eye movements and hand gestures and talk, and it does everything I want it to. That's what I want, and I think Google's working on it, so I'm really excited. But I see that as a future of computing, getting rid of I think phones eventually, when they get maybe a heads-up display. That was kind of the idea with Google Glass. They had a really good idea. Again, didn't implement it all that well. But I think that idea is still key and will go somewhere. Just if they can implement it correctly. I think people are going to get sick of using a physical phone.
The science of that is called haptics.
I think as we continue to progress, I think the line between what constitutes a specific type of application, there's a lot of talk about web application, mobile application, now you've got smartwatch applications, you've got all these different types of applications, and I think we're going to start to see a blurring of that line, where it's no longer what type of application, it's just an application. It doesn't matter what medium it sits on, it's an application, because at that point, as technology continues to progress, that application is going to run the same no matter what medium it takes, what form it takes. It's still just the same application. So for me, it's exciting. The next 10 years I think it's a great time to be in the software development realm. Because these big companies, like Ben said, as they start to pull in together, they leave a lot of space on the outside for competition. Then when they inevitably push back from each other, they leave a lot of gaps in between them for people to come up and fill those gaps and offer those connections. So I think the future really is going to be not just the hardware, but the software and that where that evolves and what that becomes.
Pete, do you have anything to add?
I think the big push in 2 years is going to be smart glass. There's if you've seen some of the videos from E3 and CS, it's huge. The ability to be able to take my phone and move the image to to my table, the ability to be able to have heads-up displays in virtual reality, such as Oculus Rift, Vive, HoloLens. I think that's going to be the next really big push. So again, I'm still at the point where I feel like the operating system itself is going to lose significance, but the hardware and the application that's supported, that's going to be first and foremost.
The user interface, the aspect of what's going to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things you're going to see change in the operating system with these demands for holographic, immersive, and haptic technologies is real-time operating systems, because all of a sudden with all the motions that are involved with movement of hands and so on, you're going to have to time slice very accurately all these motions and synchronize them.
We're predicting that there'll be quantum computing available to us on a removable consumer end in 5 years. So,
which will only be possible when you have a bandwidth and a cloud server or data center that can handle that type of computing. computing.
IBM's got Big Blue that has,
Yeah,
and the bandwidth,
exactly.
I think, is just a matter of time.
And the bandwidth has to be there as the infrastructure for it to happen. And so all of these things people have dreamed for years, but you know, I think Josh touched on this point, the bandwidth infrastructure wasn't there to allow it to happen. And you know, that's kind of what's exciting about Google trying to push fiber in some of the cities. It's allowing some of these things to take place.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank each one of you for responding to my request, and let's give our speakers a big round of applause. Any closing comments? If not, I think at this time, please mix and mingle, and you guys were pretty calm, and so if the ribbing needs to continue off camera, then please allow it. A couple of announcements. Startup Week in Springfield, Brian Kincaid was looking for some flyers, but there is Startup Week in Springfield. It's going on November 18th. You'll have to check the NATA website. Good heavens, November 20th. And so we are looking for sponsors. If there are some individuals, it's a 72-hour frenzy that I won't go into right now. It's pretty cool. You stick around long enough and you see some crazy things, right? Yeah. So that's going on. But there was something else. I feel like there was another announcement that I was supposed to make, and it had to do with an AITP event that needed sponsorship. So I will make sure and check your emails, check the NATA website. We're really upping our presence on the web. So if you have events that with your organization that you would like us to promote, please check out natasgf.com. So with that, thank you all. We'll give them one more round of applause. And drink and eat. All right? Thank you all. Yes, and be merry.
We're in too much disagreement up here, huh?
I know, you guys are pretty dull.
We needed a catalyst. We needed
I
something.
tried, I know, we didn't have that planned.
You know, what was really good is you got